All right. Well, welcome to our Pro webinar series. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. We haven't done one of these in a year, so it's exciting that we get to start this back up for 2017 going into 2018. My name is Melissa Greer. I am the Education and Wellness Coordinator for Parkinson's Resources. We are a nonprofit based in Portland with employees in Eugene and Central Oregon now. We provide information, support, and educational services to people that have been touched by Parkinson's disease. We host these live webinars in the efforts to make information on a variety of topics available through live interactive webinar video, and this is accessible to anyone throughout the whole region, all international and national. Before we start, I want to get a few details out of the way, and please feel free to submit questions as the webinar goes on. There's a question box on the right-hand side of your browser, and you can submit questions at any time, and we will get to as many questions as we can as we have time for towards the end of the presentation. If at any time you're also having technical issues, that's a great place to submit those questions as well. And now for our topic today. So today we're going to be discussing personalizing end-of-life choices. And we believe that this is an important topic to discuss, and we want to make information available for all. And we are lucky to have two women with us today that are with End-of-Life Choices Oregon, which is a nonprofit organization comprised of medical directors and volunteers. Both have been, the medical directors and volunteers have up to 18 years experience in the specialized field of helping Oregonians through their end-of-life options. They are all uniquely trained in order to provide personal and skilled professional guidance. And with us today we have Ani Sinclair, who's the outreach coordinator for End-of-Life Choices and a longtime believer in death with dignity. She began volunteering to help people understand and make their final choices in 2011. Susan Smith is also with us today. She's a retired nurse and is a co-team leader for End-of-Life Choices Oregon volunteer team in Eugene. She became involved with End-of-Life Choices after her husband chose death with dignity in 2005. So I'd like to thank both of them for being here with us today, and I'm going to hand it over. So thank you, Ani, and thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Melissa. So I'm Ani, and this is Susan. Hi. And we're so happy to have this opportunity to share what we do with you. So what we do is we educate and support people as they explore all of their end-of-life choices. We have 4 teams, one in Portland, one in Eugene, and Bend, and Southern Oregon. And we even have a few pro bono doctors who even make house calls. Our services are free, and all of the volunteers share 3 common threads. First, we're comfortable with death and dying. Next, we support our clients' autonomy and their choices. And third, we want to help our clients have the most peaceful death possible. We do this with acceptance and understanding. And now I'm going to let Susan tell you about the choices, but first I'm going to switch over to our slides.
Okay, it's really an honor for us to speak with you today. Choice is pretty constant throughout our circle of life. When we birth in, there are options like C-sections, water births, natural births to choose from. Toward the end of the circle of life, our focus turns toward ensuring as peaceful a death as possible. Today we'll be talking about how to be proactive in personalizing your choices and your plan and the importance of sharing your beliefs and intentions with your healthcare team and your support system. So, what are the choices? You're seeing them on your screen. Well, there's palliative care and hospice, stopping or not initiating treatment, palliative sedation, medical aid in dying, which comes from the Death with Dignity Act, and voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Now, these aren't mutually exclusive, so you may have hospice and choose Death with Dignity at the same time. So let's go on to palliative care and hospice and talk about that. What is it? According to the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, it's when palliative care is patient and family-centered care that optimizes quality of life by anticipating, preventing, and treating suffering. And the key word is suffering. Palliative care encompasses all life-threatening illnesses. We have some doctors that go through special training to be certified specialists in palliative care. So how does hospice care fit into this? Well, hospice care is under the umbrella of palliative care. It deals specifically with people who are terminal. It recognizes death as a natural process and supports the person and those around them during the dying process. So the requirements for entry into hospice, you must have a life-limiting illness with a 6-month or less prognosis. And the patient must choose not to seek further curative care, things like chemo, radiation, dialysis. Sometimes this is tough to give up. I know my husband and I faced this decision together and found once that we honored what was really happening at that point, we were more at peace and could cherish the time remaining instead of frantically searching for treatment that didn't exist, and that's when we got into hospice. And the third thing that's a requirement to get into hospice, it must be administered by a Medicare-approved hospice organization. So the goals and benefits of hospice, first of all, there's that comfort care, dealing with suffering. So it's pain management and overall alleviation of suffering. As LCOR volunteers, we work closely with hospice. We want to make sure a person is making a choice from a place of comfort versus desperation. Hospice also provides a supportive team to work with both the patient and their support system 24/7, and that was very important when my husband was so ill. In the middle of the night, we called them, and they were there, and they helped us know what to do. Fortunately, we didn't need someone to come to the house, but they will do that, even if it's in the middle of the night. Volunteers are also available for respite care, so that the person, the caregiver, can go to the grocery store or have an afternoon away from the intense support that they're providing. Hospice also has medical equipment and oxygen that's provided. You can enter at any time once you have a 6-month prognosis, and you can go off hospice at any time. Again, it's all about choice. Now, in recent years, transitional hospice programs have been created. They provide non-hospice palliative care, so they deal with any kind of suffering. They support people with an advanced illness, not necessarily a terminal illness, who wish to explore healthcare options but not ready for hospice care. They might still be receiving chemo or radiation or potentially curative treatment. There's usually no charge for this service, and you're assigned a social worker that can help you know when it is time for hospice and can share community resources that are available, such as knowing about a palliative care specialist. Volunteers are also available. So what are the challenges for Parkinson's patients? First of all, knowing when to seek hospice care. When do you have a 6-month prognosis? So you'll be working with your doctor to know where you are medically. Definitely consider hospice when the person has more than just Parkinson's, such as advanced dementia, recurring pneumonia, weight loss, urinary incontinence, infections, or pain. Also, when there's a concurrent diagnosis such as cancer or heart problems. You can work directly with your doctor, or you can contact Hospice directly and have them work with your doctor. So you have access to transitional hospice programs, palliative care specialists, and know when to transfer to hospice. The next choice is stopping or not initiating treatment. You might want to ask yourself, what is quality of life for me? Would you give up some quality of life in order to add days to your life? Certainly quality and quantity of life definitely figure into end-of-life choices. So it's important to work with your physician as you make your choices so you know the outcome of each choice. What's the pro? What's the con? What's happening in your life that you want to maybe stick around a little bit longer? Others, their quality of life is not what they want it to be, and they want to leave a little sooner. It's very individual, and this is something, a good idea at any age or stage to be working with your physician about this. Just know that you have a legal right to make the choice to stop treatment, such as turning off your pacemaker, or you can choose not to initiate treatment, such as chemo or radiation. You can refuse antibiotics for pneumonia or refuse CPR. I had a really close friend who moved to California before the Death with Dignity law was in place there. He had a lot of heart issues, and his family asked me, okay, what can we do in California? And I said, well, you may want to talk together first, and if you feel it's appropriate, talk to your physician about turning his pacemaker off. And indeed, they did choose that, and he died very peacefully in a couple days. Advanced directives are a very good way to communicate these choices that you are making. An advanced directive is a living will that allows you to document your wishes concerning medical treatments at the end of life. Now, it's tempting to avoid filling one out. I know I have friends that say, well, I'm going to get around to it. It definitely causes one to think about the difficult choices in life and death. But once you've done that, then you can personalize how you want your choices carried out. It brings peace of mind. Most clinics have the forms, and you can also go online to our website, and we'll give you that website at the end, the last slide. Here's a quote from Oregon Health Decisions. Whether you're 18 or 80, documenting your wishes today means your family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later. That was certainly true when my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I was grateful that we knew each other's beliefs and intentions and had completed an advanced directive. Because we were clear, the physicians were clear as to the best course of treatment and non-treatment for Joe. Now, in choosing your 2 healthcare advocates, which are required on the advanced directive, do it wisely. Family members are often chosen for that role, but they may not be the best person. Be sure it's someone who's truly able to carry out your wishes during an emotional situation. So it may be someone that's not part of the family that can have some distance and be able to fulfill your wishes. Another advanced directive form is a dementia provision. Because dementia robs a person of the ability to make clear choices, a one-page document is available to be filled out when your mind is clear. It tells what you want to have happen when your mental clarity declines and decisions need to be made about things like nutrition. This is added to your regular advanced directive. You can contact End of Life Choices Oregon for a copy of this provision. And finally, there are POLST forms. And Melissa said there was a question about that was written in before this webinar. POLST forms are, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. They're a bright pink form that's filled out with your doctor. They contain very specific physician's orders that honor your choices. That is, whether you want CPR or antibiotics in certain situations or other issues. It's what guides the EMTs in an emergency situation. It's often placed on the refrigerator. You're also given a wallet-sized card, and the information is recorded in a national database. If you're older or have a serious illness, you definitely need to fill this out. And I know a lot of doctors, when people come in for their physicals, are having this filled out, especially if they're over 70. Let's go on to the next choice, which is palliative sedation. Now, there are times when pain and or symptoms become unmanageable, and palliative sedation is the only thing that will alleviate the suffering. Palliative sedation provides enough medication to keep the person continuously symptom-free and unconscious. It's done in the final stages of dying. Its goal is comfort care, not euthanasia. It can be administered in the home as well as in care facilities, including a hospice house. The next choice is Death with Dignity Act, or Medical Aid in Dying. Let's talk about a little bit of history, because Oregon is the first state to have this law. Our law went into effect 20 years ago after being voted on twice. It also went on to be challenged unsuccessfully in a U.S. Supreme Court case. In 2016, our statistics report that since the law went into effect, a total of 1,749 prescriptions have been written, with 1,127 people actually using the medication. It has not been a slippery slope as predicted. Currently, 6 states and Washington, D.C. have death with dignity laws. Oregon, Washington, Montana, Vermont, California, Colorado, and Washington, D.C. And several of the other states are working on similar laws. So what does the Death with Dignity Act say? If certain conditions are met, a licensed Oregon MD or DO can write a prescription that a mentally competent patient can self-administer to bring about their own death. The law clearly states the death is not suicide, and the death certificate will list the cause of death as the underlying illness. Our Oregon Health Authority keeps detailed records for each case. There have been no problems in 20 years. So how do we differentiate medical aid in dying from suicide? The media often uses the phrase assisted suicide. And of course, this is incorrect. As I mentioned, Death with Dignity Act specifically states death with dignity is not suicide. With suicide, the person has a choice to live or die. Suicide is usually brought on by a mental health issue. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. With aid in dying, people who qualify have 6 months or less to live and are dying from their underlying illness. They don't have the choice to live, but they do have a choice to determine when, where, and how they want to die. And that's what our Death with Dignity Act gives them. The eligibility requirements for aid in dying, you must be 18 years or older, a resident of Oregon, and we often get a question about what that means. If you have a rent check or a utility bill or a voter card or a library card, something that says that you intend to stay in Oregon, that suffices. You must have been diagnosed with a terminal illness that will end your life within 6 months. You must be capable of making your own healthcare decisions when requesting the medication and when taking the medication. In other words, mental clarity. And you must be capable of ingesting the medication without assistance. This can be done orally or through a feeding tube. And self-administration means that you're able to start and stop the ingestion. So if someone is really weak and frail and can't hold the glass of medication, someone else can hold the glass, but the person has to ingest the medication through a straw so they can start or stop the medication. It's always about choice. So how does a person qualify? Again, the 6-month terminal diagnosis. And 2 supportive physicians must agree that the person to the person's choice and agree with a terminal diagnosis. One prescribes the medication, the other acts as a second opinion on the 6-month terminal diagnosis and the mental clarity of the person. Both fill out state forms. You must have mental clarity. If either doctor has concerns, they can ask for a psych evaluation. The Oregon law allows for simple dementia where there may be memory problems, but overall the person understands the choices that need to be made. It's often hard for a Parkinson's person to get a 6-month terminal diagnosis and still have mental clarity. They need to work with their physician. There are 3 requests, 2 oral requests to a physician, not their office staff, and 1 written request, which is a state form that is filled out. Oral requests must be recorded in the medical record, and a waiting period of 15 days or more is required between the 2 oral requests. That's to make sure that people aren't rushing into this without thinking about it. After everything is completed, the prescription can be written and mailed or hand-carried to the pharmacy and hand-carried by the physician to the pharmacy. The prescription can be filled immediately, or the script can be kept at the pharmacy till needed. The medications are expensive, so if someone isn't sure they're going to use the medication, it's best for them to leave that at the pharmacy. Our Oregon Health Plan will cover the medication, and a private foundation can help if funding is an issue. So no one that I know of has ever not had this choice. They've always had some way of purchasing the medication. There are many details required by the Death with Dignity Act, so it's very helpful to have volunteers be your guides. A client packet with information on the eligibility requirements and the qualifying process, plus other helpful information, is available to download on our website, or you can call our central number and have copies mailed. Our volunteers do home visits and assist all along the way. Now, finding 2 supportive physicians can be a challenge. If your physician is unwilling to support your choice, please notify us immediately for options in your area. Now, talking with your doctor about Death with Dignity. If you have a terminal illness and want to pursue Death with Dignity, tell the doctor you want to use Death with Dignity and ask if you're eligible. If you are eligible, ask if your doctor will be one of the 2 participating physicians, and ask him if he will record your request in the chart. That starts the 15-day waiting period. If your doctor's participation isn't possible, ask the doctor to record your request and refer you to a supportive physician. If you're not eligible for Death with Dignity, ask what your condition will look like when you are eligible. And that's very, very important for people with Parkinson's, because there is a window of opportunity to have that choice when between physical disability meeting the 6-month requirement and the dementia being a real issue. Then if you're not terminal but may want the Death with Dignity option at some point, tell your doctor that you'd like to have aid in dying as an end-of-life option. Ask if the doctor would be willing to support that choice if you ever become eligible. I know I made sure when I chose a new doctor that mine would support that choice. Okay, choosing to use medical aid in dying. After you've been through the whole process and have the option to use the medication, the question becomes, when do I take the medication? It's totally the person's choice. clear up until they actually ingest the medications. Here in Oregon, quality of life and the fear of losing independence often determines when someone takes the meds, rather than uncontrolled pain or other symptoms. That's because our hospices are so excellent at taking care of pain and other symptoms. Many times it's when the person can no longer do activities of daily living, like take a shower or go to the bathroom by themselves. Many simply say, "I'm done." Now, as a volunteer, I'm also going to be watching whether you can still swallow, whether there's nausea and vomiting that needs to be managed, and whether mental clarity is an issue. All of those things factor into when the choice can be made. We strongly encourage dialogue and involvement of the person's support system, the family and friends, all along the way, when appropriate, because sometimes family members, for various reasons, don't support aid in dying. We welcome the person's support team at home visits and are available to talk with them by phone. I know I'm going to be doing a home visit where we're going to be Skyping with someone who's not able to be with us. Some people love to have family and friends surrounding them and have potlucks and share music in the time preceding the planned death. Others are more private and may only want a spouse or friend to be present. Currently, we have 2 drug protocols available. Both come in powder form that's mixed with 4 ounces of orange juice, apple juice, or water. 2 meds that prevent nausea and promote absorption are taken an hour before. And there are also dietary restrictions in the hours preceding the event to help absorption. Our volunteers provide written instructions and go over these protocols with the person and the family once the person gets their medication. While our volunteers aren't required to be present, we highly recommend they be involved so the family and friends can spend time with their loved ones and not worry at the time of the planned death about medication protocols. Aid in dying is a very peaceful process. When it came time for my husband to use the medication, he chose to be in his favorite leather chair in our living room, surrounded by his 3 adult children, a good friend, our little dog, and myself. Some of his last words were, "I've always wondered about the mystery. Now I get to go find out." He fell asleep in 5 minutes and passed peacefully in 45 minutes. He literally died in his sleep. While it was hard to lose my best friend, I knew his suffering was over. For the past 12 years, it's been an honor to help others who chose medical aid in dying, and others making other choices. Oregon residents are fortunate to have all the choices, including that of aid in dying. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ani, and she will be sharing about the last choice, which is voluntary stopping eating and drinking.
I once had a cat named Bingo, who lived a long and full life out on the farm. As he grew older, he became less and less active. And when he was very old, he began sleeping most of the time. Near the end, he really wasn't interested in food or water at all. He had stopped drinking and eating. So as he lay there on his bed on the kitchen floor, near the warmth of the refrigerator motor, our other cat curled up beside him. They slept that way, close together that night. The next morning, we woke to find Bingo had died in the night. It was natural and peaceful. Voluntarily stopping eating and drinking is a most natural way to die. The Supreme Court ruled it legal for a mentally capable person to refuse medical treatment, including food and water. This gives control to the dying person. VSED is an appropriate choice for people who cannot swallow or digest food, also for those with a chronic disease but without a 6-month prognosis, such as those with ALS, MS, or Parkinson's disease. But a person who wants to use this method needs to be determined and sure of what he or she is doing. He needs to be clear-headed enough to remember that he doesn't want food or drink, and that is one issue of concern with the person with advanced Parkinson's, the mental clarity and the self-determination. It's natural for folks who are nearing the end of their lives to lose their appetites, and they usually don't feel hunger or thirst. I think of it more as a fast, not starvation. The word starvation is such a weighted word, like Susan was talking about earlier with the word suicide. VSED is a choice, and it's the dying person's choice. Not eating and drinking actually helps a person's organs shut down, and they experience less pain and hunger than intermittent eating or drinking would cause. At some point, the person's body releases endorphins, as in the documentary film Dying Wish. It was seen to create a euphoric state. The man in his final days said, "I am in love with the universe." So before beginning the VSED process, the person should talk with his doctor about his intentions and request a referral to hospice once he's begun the fast, if he isn't already enrolled in hospice. The hospice staff is very familiar with VSED and will help keep the person comfortable with medications taken without having to swallow, such as sublingual drops, transdermal patches, or suppositories. The caregiver should continue giving pain medications around the clock, even as the person slips into coma. And other medications, such as for high blood pressure or diabetes, should be reviewed individually by the doctor to see about discontinuing them before the fast has begun. It is important that the dying person have full-time care. You cannot do VSED alone. So family, friends, and caregivers all need to be supportive. After the first few days of the fast, the person will begin to feel lightheaded and could unexpectedly have dizzy spells. They'll need assistance to prevent them from falling. For their comfort, they'll also need to have really good oral care. It helps to have lip balm, moistened sponge swabs, mouthwash or cool water can be swished and spit out. Dry mouth could even be helped with some edible coconut oil swished and spit out. And after a person has gone into coma, it's important that they be turned regularly for skin care. Lotion can be used for hydration of the skin, as well as having a room humidifier. And this is really important. The environment should be totally free of cooking and food odors. If a person is in a facility, then the staff of the care facility will need to be supportive. If not, the person may have to be moved back to the home or to a different facility where his wishes will be honored. It's always a choice. And if the dying person asks for food or drink, the caregiver should remind the person of his wishes and then ask him if he still wants the food or drink. He may change his mind at any time and begin eating and drinking again, and then perhaps try VSED later. Having no hydration is a key to the timing of death. A person may live for a long time without food, but not drinking speeds up the process and can even decrease pain and stress of dying. Our doctors say, best to die dry. Even taking ice chips or small sips of water will prolong the process. The time to death varies, and it's really difficult to predict because there's so many different factors involved. A person's physical condition, his age, illness, body mass, even his determination to do the fast. and perhaps a readiness to go may influence the timing. For a terminally ill person, the process may take just a few days to 3 weeks, with the average time being 10 days. Some people plan how they can make this time the most meaningful for themselves and their loved ones. They could choose their favorite books to be read, music or movies to be shown. They can review old scrapbooks and photo albums, sharing memories and stories. Planning ways to bring meaning and comfort during this time may help reduce anxiety during the process. As the time goes on, the person will be sleeping more and more until they gently go into coma for the last little while. It is usually a natural and peaceful process, but it does require support from the caregivers. So now it's time for any other questions. Perhaps we answered some of the questions along the way. And what I'll do is I'll put the screen on with our information for contact while you're thinking of your questions. So I think we answered the question about the POLST.
Mm-hmm.
So when does a person need to fill out the POLST, you said?
Well, it used to be the people who are really seriously ill, congestive heart failure, COPD, cancer, but we're seeing a trend that doctors are filling them out for people who come in maybe when they're over 70 for their physical exam. They're still healthy, but there are some people on our team that experienced that, and it brought some peace of mind for them. It is very specific information, so you really have to think, but with your doctor right there, that can be a real bonus when you're filling that out. And it can always be changed. But when something happens, it happens suddenly, and to have that on the refrigerator when the EMTs come, then you're not faced with getting care that you don't want that would prolong life when you really don't want that to happen. So it's a really good idea. The form was developed by hospices in Oregon. So it's a homegrown form, and it's now national.
I know when I went in for my most recent physical, my doctor said that they needed to have my advanced directive on file there in the office, as well as having the official legal signed one in our safe deposit box, and a copy with the will and all that that's available.
Yeah, again, we often have our advanced directive in a file someplace, and usually we're not sitting next to that file when an event happens. So I have a friend who has one in the glove compartment of her car, and I don't know how many different places she named, and I thought, well, golly, that might be a good idea.
So I think I could turn on the camera again and
sure.
See if we have questions. There was a question about the VA and whether the VA covers burial expenses. And unfortunately, we're not connected with the VA, and so we would have to direct that question on for that person to contact the VA directly and find out what the benefits are.
No. Melissa, are you getting any questions?
I don't think that.
Yep, they're being sent to you via chat.
Okay. Well, thank you.
There it went.
All this technology we're just not quite used to.
So we covered the one about when working with the doctor, if someone does have thinking impairment, how far in advance can this choice be made before cognition is impaired?
For death with dignity, they need to be mentally clear all the way to when they actually take it. So, you can't qualify and then 2 months later say, I want to take it, and the person has no idea what's happening. So with death with dignity, there's a lot more restriction. With the dementia provision, you can really let your healthcare advocates know what you want, and they can work with the facility or with the care team that you're working with to do VSED or make any other choices. But unfortunately, at this point, death with dignity is limited in that sense. You can't make it when you're still clear the choice and then have the option to use it.
And there is a difference between total dementia and simple dementia.
That's right. That's right.
And so
I had a client who had simple dementia, and as the doctor asked him, what month it was, he couldn't remember the word January, but he said, it's the first month and the ball drops. So we knew that he knew it was January. So it's things like that. It isn't a mental acuity test, but the intent of the law is to protect the person all along the way, that they're not being pushed into this and that they really are clear, because this is the end point.
And with VSED, a person who is going to be intending this could make a video of himself, reminding himself that this is what he wants and this is what he's choosing to do. I once had a client who had a whiteboard with a calendar on it, and as he began the VSED process, he drew little skull and crossbones on each day and then would cross off each day as it passed so that he would be reminded. They could show him the calendar and he would see the skull and crossbones, and that would be a reminder for him as to, remember, you really didn't want to take food or water. So that mentation, it has to be there enough for someone to really make that choice. The next question is, why would someone choose VSED instead of death with dignity?
It's that they wouldn't qualify under the law. Well, and some people aren't interested in death with dignity, but those very, very restrictive qualifications make it impossible for a lot of people who would like the option, but just don't qualify.
And there's some people who don't agree with it, and we honor those people as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're all about choice.
That's right. That's right.
Whatever the client chooses.
Right. And all of the doctors that are supportive, and sometimes when we make a phone call or get an intake, people think of us as kind of the death with dignity police. We're very strong advocates, but we also want to protect the law. So we will be working both ways to make sure that they're qualified, that they get the option, but we do not want to compromise our law.
And the next question is, what are the choices for support for 24-hour care if the person doesn't have surviving family? And are all these options expensive and out of pocket? What are the choices for support for 24-hour care?
Well, certainly home health care agencies. And yes, there is expense to that. Sometimes a person is in a care facility already, but sometimes that's an issue because they're rehab centers and their goal is to rehabilitate people, not to, they just don't have that goal or thought process. So
I would say hospice has social workers who have all that information,
right.
And so I would check in with the local hospice to find out what is available in your area for support. There may be other organizations like a cancer society or something that might have volunteers who could help out with the support, but that's not really our area of expertise.
Sometimes there's a network of family and friends in church, and I had a friend of a friend who used VSED, and she had no family at all. and it was really a network of her friends. Hospice kind of organized, once a person is in a coma, then they're considered to be terminal, and hospice can come on board, and they can kind of orchestrate things, but they're not the 24/7 caregivers. Okay.
And that's another thing that I forgot to mention, is that we're not the 24/7 caregivers. We're the support and educate. So we will help you understand what the choices are and help you find the right direction to go to find the answers.
Mm-hmm.
The next question, it said regarding the VSED, but I don't think that's a whole question. The next question, what is the Washington State's equivalent organization?
It's End of Life Washington. They're based in Portland. We communicate with them all the time. When they chose their name, they didn't put choices on the end. We did, and I think they're a little jealous.
And the next question is, will there be a question of involuntary manslaughter if a husband does not contact EMT and allows death?
That depends on the Advanced Directive and the POLST. The person has chosen to not be resuscitated. It just depends on what the issue is. So check with your doctor on that.
And the next question is similar. It says, if no hospice is on board and a person stops eating and drinking, will the caregiver be arrested? So again, having made a written statement of what you're planning to do, having spoken with your doctor about it, and hopefully having hospice on board with VSED would prevent any legal action from taking place. And it is legal for a person to refuse food and water. The Supreme Court said it was legal. The next question says, my mother is a very private person. She does not intend to have hospice care or lots of people present as she declines. Will the POLST and medical power of attorney protect the few people around her? Yes. The POLST would protect the people around her. And
well, I would think that she would be working with her doctor or some kind of medical team all along the way. I understand a lot of people are private. We have people that way too. And
you know, some people have said they don't want us to come out for a house call, and then when they start reading through the material about the choices, they go, oh, I think it might be nice to have somebody explain this. So
exactly,
they change their mind and invite us to come out.
And it's best to have some medical organization that's involved. It doesn't have to be highly involved, but it needs to be. They need to be involved so that the legal thing is a little clearer.
And the next question. It's a really good one.
Okay, good.
What if one's doctor is hostile to either of these choices and does not want to participate in any way?
Then that's when you call us, because we do have supportive physicians, and that, and really in all of the areas of the state, we usually do. I mean, we can't always guarantee somebody might be on vacation for a while, but we do know of doctors who are supportive. Some of our doctors in Eugene, because our one of the main hospitals is faith-based, are not allowed. They may personally believe in it, but they're not allowed. So it's always a challenge.
And the next question segues right into that, is how do you find a doctor to prescribe the end-of-life medication? Call you? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Or email or contact the organization. And we will help you find a doctor. It has been one of the big challenges here, especially in a faith-based hospital network, to find doctors who are willing to participate, even though it's been a law for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And so we do have.
And we're finding that there are retired physicians who are coming to support us. They can do it under a volunteer provision of the Oregon Medical Board. And as long as they don't charge, then they don't have to deal with really high-priced malpractice insurance. And they're a lot more available, too, since they're retired.
And I think that these retired doctors are looking at their own future, thinking, what would I want if I were in that situation? And it encourages them to volunteer with us, to give other people the same choices that they would want for themselves.
That's right. So if you know of doctors that are interested, why, send them our way, and our doctors help educate other doctors also. Because it is quite a process to go through, and there are forms, and they need to be sent someplace, and appointments, and protocols, and we are the guides. We really guide people through all this.
And the next question, how do I talk to my family about this issue? That's a big question. If you were considering VSED, I recommend the movie to watch. It's called Dying Wish, and it's available on Amazon. And it's a documentary that a doctor made of his own end-of-life process. And, you know, it's very informative, and it's pretty gentle. And but just how to put the topic on the table.
You know, our website is very informative. If they're online people, you might direct them to our website. That's one of the things as volunteers we do, is if the family is open enough to come to a home visit, then often we can kind of shift their thinking. Often that word suicide is in their mind because it's so prevalent in our media. And we can tell them just what we told you of the difference between suicide and death with dignity. So we're available to help with that, to kind of be a mediator in that. And we can also, or we can work with you and give you words and how to approach them, because it is important. If we have our support system with us, it makes it a more peaceful and, I guess, fulfilling kind of event.
And also many communities or churches or hospices are sponsoring death cafes, which is an opportunity to sit with a group of people at tables for four, and with a list of questions on your menu, and things like, have you ever been with someone when they were dying? And you get to consider your answer and share what you want to share, but it's an opportunity to normalize the topic of death and dying. And it is a normal, natural thing, dying, and it's really important to put it on the table, to have these discussions. So we encourage you to do that and search out the Death Cafe in your area.
Right. And going back to hospice, I think I forgot to mention, on their team, you know, you've got a chaplain, you've got a social worker, a nurse, and a doctor, and those folks are very prepared in death and dying language, and they can help you also work with your family.
And I have a game called My Gift of Grace that you could bring out the game, My Gift of Grace, and it has questions on cards, and you draw a card and you have the opportunity to answer them. So that's another way to begin the conversation. The next question is, I think this is the last question, who determines clarity at the time the person decides they want to implement death with dignity?
Well, that's a good... Well, as volunteers, if somebody chooses to have us there, we certainly would be people who would notice that and be concerned. And we would be required to then contact our medical director and work with what's happening. Otherwise, if we're not there, there really at this point is no one monitoring that. The person prescribing the medication, if it's your family doctor, might know about the decline, something like that, but there really isn't a death with dignity police that come around.
I suppose that when we present the medication in the glass and we say, do you know what this will do when you drink this? And if the person has no idea what this would do, we wouldn't continue. We would stop.
That's right.
But it hasn't ever happened in my experience.
Mine either.
The people who choose death with dignity are very independent thinkers and very determined to end their suffering. And so, you know, I feel like it takes courage and bravery and determination, but it's also seeing the peaceful way to exit this life.
It is.
Well, thank you so much, Ani and Susan, and thank you everyone for participating. A video recording of the webinar will be available on PRO's YouTube channel within 2 weeks, and you can find that link on our website at parkinsonsresources.org. Ani and Susan did provide their email information on this slide, so if you haven't taken that down, if you do have further inquiries, you can also email me at Melissa, MELISSA, at parkinsonsresources.org. This concludes our webinar broadcast. So thank you so much for doing this, Ani and Susan. It's our first one in the year, and we're really excited to continue this. Stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be a November date, which will be available soon. And that's going to be with Dr. Rosenbaum, reviewing research developments in Parkinson's disease and where he believes the research is taking us. So thank you again, ladies, and thank you everyone for participating and taking such time to answer everyone's questions. So have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.